I am Ben Doc Askins, the psychedelic science war storyteller, and this is the Anti-Hero's Journey podcast. What's up, all you anti-heroes out there? Doc Askins, bringing another one of these Q5 podcasts into your ears and straight into your brain that I know you can't get enough of, where I ask 5 of my favorite questions in my ketamine-assisted psychotherapy practice to people in the world that I think are cool and manage to lure in to being guests on this podcast. And the cool person that I've lured in today happens to live in Western Colorado. His name is Dr. Ben Peery, MD, married with 3 daughters. He's got 20 years working as an emergency medicine physician and 4 years as a SWAT medic. Last year, he started a podcast speaking with frontline healthcare first responders and law enforcement, cops, paramedics, nurses, military veterans, trauma surgeons, etc., all about mental health. He's an avid bow hunter, a fisherman, a mountain biker, and a waterman, and he's currently working in a fellowship this fall in precision/genomic medicine and integrative medicine. Ben, it's a pleasure having you on the podcast today, my friend.
Thanks, Doc. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a real honor, and I've been able to look through your site and appreciate like your North Star and your kind of the direction you're going with all this. It resonates with a lot of the topics that we discuss on my podcast too, and just the world that I seem to be finding myself in these days.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that greatly. I feel like there's a lot of synchronicity here just in the couple minutes that we were talking before I hit the old record button, and I'm sure we'll discover more along the way. But let's get rocking and rolling with what's your story.
Yeah, so my story is that I, as you know, as you said in the bio, I'm 20 years in this career. I did my emergency medicine training in Denver. Denver Health was Denver General, as it was called back in the day. It was sort of they called it the Knife and Gun Club, and which was the perfect place to train if you're in the ER. It's just like your experience as a combat medic. If you're gonna do that work, you need to be busy. And so I walked out of that residency after 4 years, and decided to move up to the mountains, and kind of found myself in this community. Western Colorado is an interesting place. It's busy as hell because of the austerity, the rural aspect. There's every permutation of trauma is out here, including all the other things in between, the strokes, the heart attack. So I found myself really, really not in the weeds so much, but just so immersed in this world, which is really, it's really rewarding. Getting to see people outside of work was fantastic, and patients would stop me at the supermarket, and it's almost like a Rockwell thing. You're not. I wasn't expecting that coming from a big urban program, but I had a really great career up here, and was fortunate enough to start to work with just amazing people that were incredibly dedicated to the craft of emergency medicine, and even just the work in the hospital. It's very collaborative, working with our trauma surgeons, and we'd run upstairs and intubate a sick ICU patient, or help the OBGYN department deal with a postpartum hemorrhage. And I just loved it. I absolutely am addicted to that world of just the go, the bearing the throttle. And it was just, it's a very rewarding thing to do, and to be a part of a team. And I was able to jump in with our local SWAT team. We have Garfield County is one of the biggest counties in the state of Colorado, and we have a very small SWAT team. They actually approached me and asked me to jump on the team, and I think there were 13 guys at the time, and I didn't realize kind of what I was getting into. And about a year later, I realized that I had been called fuckface more times in my life than I was expecting. I was the second.
Just means you're doing it right, collecting some scars.
Yeah. I went to the Utah County SWAT School, which is about a week long. They do this, very trauma intensive immersion, kind of like the SEAL concept of like maximal stress, no sleep, and it was, but it's an amazing experience. I was really fortunate to get to be embedded with this team, and this county is so busy with the amount of drug stuff coming up I-70, so the amount of operations and stuff in the middle of the night was incredible. It kind of brought me into that world of kind of that operator world, and I was just blown away by what I was seeing and the level of training and stuff. It was incredible. But the long and short of it is that over time, I'm 53 now, was starting to break down physically, and I ended up I developed an autoimmune condition called spondylitis, which I get the peripheral version, which is involvement of my, like patellar tendon, Achilles tendon. And I was just getting crippled. I was taking steroids all the time and trying to figure out immune suppressants. And I realized kind of halfway or towards the tail end of COVID that I was double immune suppressed, running around the hospital wearing a PAPR hood, taking care of super sick patients. I've never seen that many sick patients in my whole career, and I realized that I was burning out from not from a I hate this career thing, but just energetically. I'd seen some cases that were starting to stick with me in ways that I didn't really realize were cumulative, and I finally, we had a terrible, I've talked about this in my podcast. We had a terrible double stabbing. A mom stabbed her two teenage kids to death. And we were, we were doing a thoracotomy on a 9-year-old, and I just had hit the wall at that point. And so I
Yeah.
decided to step away and and take some time for myself. And I started a podcast just talking to, I'd spoken to a SWAT commander. He'd given a really amazing presentation here. He was in the Pulse nightclub shooting in 2018 in Orlando, and he talked about how the impacts on his team and the mental health, and they all kind of realized how deeply embedded trauma was with them and how dysfunctional they were. And it hit me like a freight train. I was like, that's me. I am that fucked up dude. I need some time. And
Yeah.
I experimented with some psychedelics. I had an amazing, incredible experience with ayahuasca. My brother is a practitioner, and then he brought me into the Bufo world. I did one Bufo experience, and I just it was so transformative and so
Wow.
powerful that it changed kind of the course of my life. And then as I went down the path with the podcast, I realized how many people in this career on the front lines are all similarly affected. And the more people I talk to about it, the more resonance and shared stories and synchronicity I found. So
Man,
that's
that's
what.
an incredible story. Yeah, and you did a great job of doing what we were talking about before, compressing that down and you know, giving us the condensed bottom line up front version of your story. I greatly appreciate that. But what an awesome story, man. I feel honored that we're having this conversation. So I ask everybody about their story to hear about their memories and where they're coming from. And then the next question is about what are your intentions? Where are you headed? Where do you imagine things going from here?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I ask myself that a lot. I imagine that's probably at the forefront of a lot of people's. If you take stock of your life, any of us, that question has to be on the tip of your tongue. And to answer it, I would say my intentions are. I have found a lot of positive momentum and personal healing just from speaking to people about their experiences. And the more that I talk to people, the more I want to be around it. I'm fascinated by this concept of healing and change. And so, for me, I'm my intention is to change my identity in a way. I don't have to be, the ER doc, 20-year veteran, this guy, wearing the white coat. It was armor for a long time, and I had to seriously reconfigure my DNA, to so to speak. But it's been transformative and very helpful for me. It's helped me heal physically, honestly. Um, I'm sleeping better. I'm taking better care of myself. I don't have my foot on the throttle anymore. And then the next iteration is I'm fascinated about the world of psychedelic assisted therapy. I'm fascinated with the world of mental health. I just think that there's a tremendous upswell of this concept of taking care of ourselves and being mindful and then trying to cut through the chaff. There's a lot of bullshit too, and I'm trying to figure out what really sticks. And so that's my intention, is to help people, help myself, and kind of redefine a new role for myself as a physician, and hopefully continue to help people and heal. And that's my goal.
Yeah, those are outstanding. Beautiful intentions. I like that a lot. So the bridge that I use between people's stories and their intentions, between the past and the future, between memory and imagination, is to ask about gratefulness, because I think gratefulness is one of the best ways to bring us into the present moment. So, what are you grateful for?
Well, I had this conversation with with, we've had a couple of say strange interface, but I've had some of my good friends die over the last couple of years, including my father. Strange. I had a colleague and friend that was a hospitalist die of a brain tumor, and right at this inception of COVID, a very good friend, she's also a hospitalist, died of this horrible complications from MRSA, and probably ultimately it was one of our first cases of COVID. We just didn't know it, but and so I was talking to her husband, her widowed husband, the other day, and he said, "You know, man," he said, "your greatest commodity right now is time." And I was kind of blown away. I kind of had to sit down and think about that a little bit. I was thinking about, like, what am I going to do next? Feeling this angst. I would, should, could. Those conversations, and I realized he was right. And so I'm very grateful for this time that I've been able to sit quietly with myself. I actually taught myself to sit outside this little garage in the sun and just do nothing for a bit, and let myself sit with, like, pain, and sit with uh, uh, my own thoughts and my own worries and my own limitations. And so I'm grateful that the days that I can do that, we talked a little bit about hunting before we started recording. I just spent some time in the woods with my bow chasing elk, and I'm extremely grateful for those moments I can just lay there and listen and watch the woods do their thing. So I took that for granted. I really did, as an ER doc. Time was just a thing, a vehicle for me to get shit done and be part of, and then recreate this world. And I'm slowing down and recognizing that this is a precious commodity, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, doing nothing is so hard for dudes like us, but every time that I do it, it's such a it's an inexplicable experience. It's always worth it to do nothing.
Yeah, I've my therapist, dear friend Risa, said, she said, the problem with sitting yourself is it's not safe. It's not safe sitting with our thoughts and our own mind. And so, and also, especially today, right? I mean, I have thousands of distractions. I got my phone, I got this, I got that. So we don't really sit in silence ever. And including my kids, they struggle with it. So I feel like that's a skill, an exercise, a tolerance that I'm building up to. It's a muscle that was underused.
Yeah, I joke around and make it into a play on words. I'll be like, I'm grateful for nothing. And some people get it and some people don't, right? So with your whole story and all your intentions and all your gratefulness, Ben, what are you creating?
Well, that's a good question too. I think that what I'm creating is a space for people to, and in particular with the podcast, it's a space for people to tell their story, as you're kindly allowing me to tell mine. There is healing with it. There is a therapeutic effect, and it also allows me to kind of reorient myself. I hear amazing strategies. Like, I interviewed this guy named Jonathan Wilson, who's a Navy SEAL. He's created this app for mental health. And I was blown away by the energy of this guy, like,
Yeah, that's Envy, right? INVI, that's his company. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And I told my wife, I was like, God, there's, um, to be around that is really inspiring, to hear people just in action, like yourself, with the work you're doing, and you wrote a book. And I just, more and more, that to me is just it's a great thing to be around. And to be around that, it pushes me as well. I'd like to continue to be embedded in that work, and see what direction that pushes me, again, with, like, doing the podcast, talking to people. I just think there's, especially in emergency medicine, we are terrible about taking care of ourselves, or even admitting that we're
Yeah.
fucked up. And military cops, they're better at it, especially now. I was amazed that the SEAL community, how comfortable they are saying, we we're going to put our work into this. We're going to take, make sure we're strong. And we're also that we're admitting we're vulnerable. And at times weak. I find that astounding, and very, transformative, and hopefully leading the world in many regards, because the way people look at those guys is superhuman, but they're not.
Yeah, from the outside, I know that community hasn't always been that way, but there's been these ways that SOCOM in general just sort of drips out culturally into the Department of Defense, especially as far as tactical medicine goes. The way that the 75th Ranger Regiment does medicine today is the way that, everybody on the street in the United States will be doing medicine 5 years from now or something, because it takes that long for the research to drip out there. And maybe with the internet and stuff, it's happening a lot faster than it used to. But it's also my hope, like I recognized they have I think they call it the Thor 3 program that fifth group does down on Fourth Campbell, that involves a lot of recovery, like active recovery, doing yoga, getting a rumble roller out, doing, cold therapy, all of these sorts of things for recovery to try to keep people in optimal health. And I'm hopeful that they'll lead the way as far as mental health goes as well, so that drips out across the entire military and then across the entire world eventually, right? And they are leading the way in a whole bunch of ways. The gas pedal and the brake pedal being balanced appropriately, that's the way, right?
Yeah, 100%. I was down at the fire station the other day. I'm still the medical director for Glenwood Fire, but we're talking about, like, we're just calculating how many hours and how many dollars are spent on each firefighter, for example, here in our small rural agency. And it's not a small number of just invested time, energy, effort, money, resources. And so it makes sense to maximize these guys' longevity, their performance. It's hard to get people to come up to the mountains of Colorado. It's hard to get anyone to do this work anymore. That includes teachers, therapists at the hospital, techs. It's all. So if you to not put that work in and preserve this elite person that you've trained, you've done the work with, and they're going to break down because this job it has so many embedded challenges that we're not addressing on the front end, is insane. And fortunately, I think there's some forward-thinking people out there that are like, "Yep, we're going to make sure these high-performing people are maximally taken care of. Mind, body, spirit. That's the way it should be across the spectrum of really all jobs, but especially at the higher end, with people that have spent a lot of time and effort training these folks."
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that's incredibly insightful. I think that's the way forward for sure. So with all your intentions, all your story, all your gratefulness, you're making this podcast, right? Are you creating anything else?
Well, so it's interesting, and I think you and I share space with some of the Wild Health folks. Just for the listeners, Wild Health is one of the companies out there that's doing what's called precision medicine, which is it's a funny way, and I heard this described as medicine 3.0, and I've heard it described, and then when you add the mental health piece, it's medicine 4.0. But Peter Attia talks about this, just the notion that that not one size fits nobody. So, for example, like I just got my own genomic report, which is essentially a look at everything about me that's related to my DNA, how I process carbon, how I recover, how I sleep, how I deal with sugar, how I deal with fat. And I was surprised. I'm a lean guy. I don't carry a lot of excess body fat. I try to stay in shape, but I was stunned at like some of the things that were there that were very unique to me. Like I've got a proclivity for type 2 diabetes, for example. I got to be really careful. I probably don't process saturated fats that well. So this notion of like, Peery should be keto or Peery should be this, or it's not. It's very unique, and I'm doing the fellowship with these guys, and I'm enjoying it a lot because it's just a totally different view of medicine. As again, making blanket statements about who should be on statins, who shouldn't. Well, if you look at a person's genomic pattern, some people just absolutely aren't tolerating those things, or they should be on a much more aggressive regimen. And I find that, again, a little bit of what we're talking about with mental health awareness, same thing with physical health. I think that is the next frontier, and I definitely want to be a part of it. I think it's a credible way to look at people as unique individuals, and then tailor a whole, sleep, diet, exercise, recovery plan around who they are, not what we say should be done for an entire population based medical recommendations.
Yeah, the chief science officer there at Wild Health, Dr. Mike Mallon, is a genius, and there's a lot of mixed stuff with respect to whether genomics is ready for prime time and whether it's clinically useful and all of those sorts of things. And I understand like the science behind a bunch of that, where like the way that it's been done in the past is time consuming, and it's all associational level data, and it's, hey, how like clinically useful is this or isn't this? And they've solved for it. Like they've figured out how to bring that medicine 3.0/4.0 thing into people's lives meaningfully with genome-wide association studies, and polygenic risk scores are all being involved in what's an algorithmic guided way of putting this whole thing together, and then incorporating health coaching and incorporating physician visits, so that you've got like a whole health team collaborating around you. Now, I'm a huge Peter Attia fan. I love like his book Outlive is outstanding, but like things are happening in the world so fast now with AI and with the technology that's available to us. So like I'll give you this little like anecdote, right? I was listening to Outlive on Audible on the audiobooks, right? And he gives the example in there, because I've been a subscriber to The Drive for years now, and he's gone through like explaining his writing process, and it's been 5 years that he was working on that book. And he gives this example of real soon there'll be full self-driving capability. Like he's talking about, we've got the cameras, we've got the engines, like the cars are going to be here real soon. And I'm listening to the book in a Tesla that's driving itself at that time, like hands-free, right? No, like we're already here, Peter. It's already here. It's already ready to go, right? Like my buddy's Tesla is self-driving, And I thought that was just the coolest thing in the world. Was like, yeah, like medicine 3.0 is light years ahead of how it's been done for the longest time. And it's already starting to be outdated because of the technology that's available through, like if you want to get on the cutting edge as a patient or as a provider, you need to look up Wild Health on wildhealth.com. Like my friends over there, all geniuses and all good-hearted people. Get involved in the fellowship, become a patient, live forever.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? You said that. I think people, and it's a little bit what frustrates me about the world of, because everyone wants to live forever, but there's a lot of Sigma people running around. And when I say Sigma, like super fucking high performers, no question. I mean, these guys get 28 hours out of a 24-hour day. They're CEOs, captains of industry, running, like the Jocko model of like you're running a apparel company with his podcast and all the things he's doing. Just an amazing dude. But the issue is that there is no fountain of youth. Although people want to take, like, I get testosterone questions all the time, and this guy, he asked me the other day, is like, I should, hey doc, what do you think about taking testosterone? I said, I don't know. How's your sleep? How's your life? How's your relationship with your wife? Like, he's like, he's worried about getting more energy and getting more out of his day, but it's like putting, racing fuel into a car that's running on a cylinder is down.
Should I get a blood transfusion from a 19-year-old? Is that what I should be doing, Doc? What should I be doing? No, man. Like, get a good night's sleep and shut the fuck up once in a while and listen to your wife. That'd go way further.
I find that people are where I think we're going, and if I could, even if there's a medicine 5.0, is the cutting away of stuff. Like if I think where we're going to ultimately end up is back at the beginning, to realize that we need to go back to 1972 when we didn't have cell phones. We spent time sitting around at the dinner table having long conversations with our families or with our friends, or going over to someone's house with a beer and sitting down on the porch. I'm not making prosaic statements about 1970s because they had some fucked up things. But the point is that I think we're going to find that doing less uh, and this notion of like cold plunges and stuff is really a way to just sit with yourself. And I think if carving that time out of your day is probably where we're going to find the most value, the most healing, and cutting out the distraction, the social media, the cell phones, all of the, the polarizing news, everything that just is toxic for us. Our worlds are toxic enough with just trying to take care of each other and our kids and our families, much less adding all the other elements. I don't think we've ever been so isolated in our entire life than we are today, away from each other.
Yeah, we need a tribe, like Sebastian Junger's book,
Yep.
is an example. There's plenty of other great examples out there, but that's the first one that comes to mind for, listening to you talk here. But I think those are beautiful things that you're participating in creating. That brings us around to the fifth and final question, though. Dr. Ben Peery, who are you really?
I had a friend when I was going through this identity crisis. When I stepped away from the ER, he said, I've never thought about you as doctor anybody. You're just my friend Ben from that I met when you were 18 years old, And I realized that I'm just a person that gets to like enjoy other people and enjoy some very, as we were saying, simple things. I'm not any one thing. I'm certainly the moment I put down my, my SWAT stuff, my doctor stuff, my this and my that, my CrossFit stuff. I literally have walked away from all of that, and I'm not any of those things. I'm not any one thing, and I find that to be incredibly freeing, and allows me to actually sit in a little bit of peace, a little bit of quiet contemplation. To not have to be something is such a release of weight, of expectation, of ambition and angst and ennui. And I find that has been transformative and allowed me a little bit of freedom, to maybe reinvent myself in some other way that's going to be supportive for me and more balanced, allow for some other possibilities. Maybe I want to write, maybe I want to play guitar, who friggin' knows, some gentler, softer things for sure. A better father, maybe a better husband, more attentive, a little funnier, not so serious all the fucking time.
This is the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like that a lot. Huh. Well, you got any final thoughts for our audience, my friend?
Well, I'll tell you, the only final thought I have is, and this has been a hard lesson for me, is gentleness. Learning to treat myself with some gentleness and allowing myself to fail, not a failure in the way that we think about, but just be less. It was very hard for me to limp around with my illness and not be able to do things, and also to allow myself time to sit and just be vulnerable, be less, not always having to it's very easy to take steroids and pop up and be able to run off and do the other things I wanted to do, but to treat myself with respect and go easy. And that is hard for a lot of people, especially in our worlds where we build up this thing, this narrative, this myth of this super person, and that's not the way to live a happy, balanced life. And at least it hasn't been for me. And it finally caught up with me. And what has helped me a lot is to treat myself respectfully and give myself a break, and have a little humor about it and have a little lightness about it. And that's I hope that the listeners can find that within themselves as well, and find themselves in some softer, more gentle environments, because I think that's how we resonate best as humans.
Yeah, that's beautiful, brother. I appreciate it. I'm glad you came on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate it as well. I love your work, and I'm excited to see where the next iterations and your next guests. And thanks for sharing with me, and appreciate Yeah, hope people can jump on my podcast, take a listen. Got all kinds of wild and interesting guests as you do.
Yeah, what's the name of your podcast if they want to look it up? What?
The Grit Podcast with Dr. Ben Peery. It's on Spotify and Apple, and yeah, we're moving forward. I just did my 60th episode, so we're still cranking along. So
Nice.
yeah.
Check them out, everybody.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure, my friend.
The same. You too. Thanks again for your time, Doc, and your good work.